to help you heal from the inside out. I'm Kim Larson, certified functional nutrition coach, fast like a girl coach, and founder of larsonnutrition.com. Here we talk about real health transformation, how food, fasting, and lifestyle can change your hormones, your metabolism, and longevity. So today, I want to talk to you about a topic that has become one of the most fascinating areas of modern metabolic science. And honestly, it's something I had heard about. I hadn't heard about before, but had never, or I had heard about before, but never really, explored it until recently. The molecule is called NAD. And once I started digging into the research, I realized it sits right in the middle of many of the things we talk about all the time on this podcast: metabolism, your mitochondrial health, your insulin sensitivity, your aging, your brain function, and even how the body repairs itself, even your skin. So, what scientists are beginning to understand is that NAD is deeply connected to the ability of your cells to produce energy. So, I started taking NMN, and all of a sudden I wasn't sleeping well. And I wasn't taking it till like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I looked it up. I'm like, and I had literally just started the NMN. And I was like, why am I not sleeping well? Is it the NMN? Well, I learned that your NAD is highest in the morning. So if you're going to take NMN to help support your NAD, which I'll dig into, you want to take that NMN first thing in the morning. You wake up and take it right away when your NAD is at its highest point. Even if you're older, that's when you're at the highest point. So I highly recommend. I take Double Woods NMN. I think it's H. I'm going to change. I was taking the NMN, but I started using this app, Supco, that looks at your supplements. And it told me that the NMN from Double Wood was just okay, but their NMN, I think it's H or NMN. Yeah, I think it's NMNH was much better. So I'm switching to that. And I just started taking it in the morning and bam, I'm back to my normal sleep schedule. I'm not having disrupted sleep. So it took me about 3 nights of bad sleep to go, I just started. Maybe this is what it is. So when researchers study aging, they consistently notice, a pattern, right? Cells do not necessarily lose their machinery completely as we get older, but that machinery becomes less efficient, right? So energy production slows down, repair systems work more slowly, and cells become more vulnerable to stress. And Lord knows, if you're still working a full-time job, there's a lot of stress. I was in sales for 30 years, and there's a lot of stress in sales. And some people, you might have a lot of stress in your jobs. So that observation led the scientists to ask an important question. What if part of what we call aging is not simply damage accumulating over time, but it's a gradual decline in the cell's ability to generate and manage energy? I just had some coconut, so I can feel it's like in my teeth. To understand why NAD matters, we have to take a deep step inside the cell. Inside every cell are structures called mitochondria, which I've talked about this before. And many of you have probably heard mitochondria described as like the power plants of the cell. And that analogy is helpful because they are responsible for generating energy. But the reality is actually even more interesting than that, because mitochondria acts like tiny biological engines that convert nutrients into usable energy. So when we eat food like carbohydrates, fats, or protein, those nutrients are broken down into smaller molecules. Eventually, those molecules enter metabolic pathways that feed into the mitochondria. Inside the mitochondria, a series of reactions occur that ultimately generates ATP, which is the energy currency of the body. Kind of like, having a credit card or cash, right? Every time your muscles contract, every time your brain sends a signal, every time your immune system responds to a pathogen, ATP is being used. And the process of producing ATP is incredibly intricate. It involves moving electrons through a chain of protein complexes embedded in the mitochondrial membrane. So you can think of it almost like a conveyor belt inside the cell where electrons move from one station to the next. And as those electrons move along the chain, energy is released and captured to produce ATP. And those electrons cannot move through the system on their own. They require molecules that can pick them up and deliver them to the right place. So one of the most important of those molecules is NAD. And NAD functions like a shuttle. So during metabolism, NAD accepts the electrons and becomes NADH. And that NADH then delivers those electrons to the mitochondrial electron transport chain. And so when the electrons move through that chain, energy is released, and that energy is used to produce ATP. This is it's wild how it's all connected. So NAD itself is not energy, but it is absolutely essential for producing energy. And when NAD levels are abundant, mitochondria run efficiently, cells generate energy smoothly, repair systems function effectively, tissues maintain resilience. So when NAD levels decline as we age, the entire cellular energy system begins to slow down. And for decades, scientists studying aging noticed something curious. When they measured NAD levels in younger organisms and compared them to older ones, NAD levels were consistently lower in older tissues. In some organs, the decline could reach 40 to 60% across the lifespan. That's huge. So researchers wanted to know, why does this happen? And they eventually discovered that several biological processes contribute to the decline. One of those processes, I'm going to make sure my heat is on here because it's a little chilly in here. One of those processes involves DNA repair. Every day, our DNA experiences thousands of tiny injuries. Some come from environmental factors like radiation or toxins, while others arise simply from normal metabolism. Cells rely on repair systems to fix their damage and maintain genomic stability. But one of the repair systems responsible for this job uses enzymes called PARP enzymes, short for poly-ADP ribose polymerases. These enzymes detect breaks in DNA strands and initiate repair. The important detail here is that PARP enzymes require NAD to function. Every time a PARP enzyme repairs DNA damage, it consumes NAD. So when the body is dealing with higher levels of oxidative stress or inflammation, DNA repair actively increases and the demand for NAD increases with it. So another factor contributing to NAD decline involves an enzyme called CD38. So this is interesting. I've been reading all this stuff. So CD38 breaks down NAD and converts it into molecules involved in immune signaling. And researchers discovered that CD38 actively increases with age, particularly in tissues experiencing chronic inflammation. So when you're eating highly processed foods or getting plastics in your life, you're not eliminating the plastics, eating out of plastic, microwaving in plastic, using plastic cutting boards, using plastic Tupperware, you drinking out of plastic water bottles. All of this plastic is toxic to our bodies. Wearing plastic clothes, synthetic fibers, instead of wearing cotton or linen or wool. These fabrics are natural fabrics, but when you're wearing polyester, any of these man-made fabrics, they're made with oil. And talk about gasoline oil, right? So these are made with oil. And these things are very toxic to our bodies. So that means the body ends up in a situation where NAD is being consumed by DNA repair systems and broken down by inflammatory processes at the same time. So when you're constantly causing all of this inflammation and even stress, right? Stress is also causing inflammation. Um, breaking down the inflammatory processes at the same time can overwhelm the system because over many years, this gradual depletion can reduce the availability of NAD inside cells, and it contributes to the slower mitochondrial metabolism. So one of the studies that I learned or that I read about really sparked excitement about this field involved a compound called NMN, or, and try to say this 10 times, nicotinamide mononucleotide. NMN is one of the molecules the body can use to build NAD through what is called the salvage pathway. Essentially, it's a recycling system the body uses to regenerate NAD. So, in a peer reviewed study published in the journal Cell Metabolism, researchers gave NMN to aging mice whose mitochondrial function had begun to decline. The scientists measured mitochondrial activity in muscle tissue before and after treatment. Within about a week, NAD levels increased in the muscle cells of those animals. Even more interesting, the mitochondria began functioning more efficiently. The muscle cells were able to consume oxygen more effectively and produce more ATP, which we talked about earlier. In practical terms, the animals demonstrated improved endurance and metabolic function. Now, it's important to emphasize that this was an animal study, not a human clinical trial, but it suggested something fascinating is that when NAD levels were restored, mitochondrial performance improved. That finding helped researchers start thinking about aging in a different way. Instead of viewing aging purely as damage accumulating over time, scientists began considering whether some aspects of aging might involve declining metabolic capacity, essentially a gradual slowdown in the cellular engines that power the body. And this is where the conversation becomes especially relevant for many of the women who listen to this podcast. A lot of women in midlife describe what they are experiencing in very practical language. They say things like, I don't bounce back like I used to, or my workouts feel harder, or my brain feels foggy. I get that if I don't sleep well. Even with taking creatine and taking NMN now, NMNH, I get a foggy brain if I don't sleep well. So it's really important to work out and do your regular sleep schedule. Because I know that if I'm only getting 5 hours sleep, I am like, I'm foggy. So it's really important. Like everybody has a different sleep schedule, right? My husband likes to sleep 8 or 9 hours. I like to sleep like 6 hours and 45 minutes, 7 hours, really good in that range. Maybe even 6.5. And it's different for everybody, right? So, with that feeling like my workouts are harder, my brain feels foggy, or my metabolism feels slower than, even though I'm doing the right things like eating right and working out and my metabolism, I'm still not losing the belly fat or whatever. Those experiences are not explained by NAD alone, of course, but NAD sits right in the middle of the cellular energy systems that influence those changes. So when you start looking at health through the lens of cellular energy, many of the strategies we talk about in functional nutrition begin to make even more sense. This is one of the reasons my work through Larson Nutrition focuses so heavily on helping people improve metabolic health through sustainable lifestyle strategies, building muscle, improving protein intake, supporting metabolic flexibility, stabilizing blood sugar, and incorporating strategic fasting cycles are not just habits that influence body weight. They are signals that influence mitochondrial function and the energy systems inside our cells. I can tell you that we went to Pond Hill Farm today for breakfast, and I got, because it's almost St. Patrick's Day, I got a corned beef hash. And it had corned beef, it had 2 sunny side up eggs and potatoes. So I started with the protein purposely first because I know that if I start with the protein, I get full faster than starting with carbohydrates. So I had the egg and the corned beef hash first, and I couldn't even finish it. I was so full. I think I had slipped in like one little tiny piece of potato, but I had to pack it all up and take it with. Now my husband had gotten, it was on rye bread, but it was a what do you call it, stacked up with hollandaise sauce. And it was like homemade hollandaise, and he had slices, thin slices of corned beef, and oh my god, was his was better than mine. It was so good, that corned beef just sliced like that. I had kind of fatty pieces, and I don't really like the fatty pieces, so I get pass them off to him. So if you're interested in working with me through Larson Nutrition, you can visit larsonnutrition.com to learn more about my personalized coaching programs and hormone supportive nutrition plans. Another dimension of this conversation that often gets overlooked is environmental stress. Many everyday products contain compounds that can disrupt hormones or increase inflammatory burden. I can tell you I experienced this because I had plugins all over my house. I've talked about this before. I had those beautiful smelling, clean, what is it, clean linen or fresh, clean scent or whatever it was, right? Well, those were all hormone disruptors. You end up getting a cyst, or you get cancer, or you get some kind of metabolic disease that is caused by all of these hormone disruptors. So, that's one of the reasons I created Larson Botanicals, right? It's a line of skincare and candles made with organic ingredients without any synthetic fragrances or harsh chemicals. Reducing that toxic exposure may seem like a small step, but over time, those changes can support the body's overall resilience. You can explore those products at larsonbotanicals.com. So I want to talk more about NAD, and it's not just a miracle molecule that suddenly reverses aging. The real insight is that many aspects of aging may involve changes in the cellular energy environment. When cells have the resources they need to produce energy efficiently and repair damage effectively, they maintain resilience. So that's why lifting weights is so important, and getting the right nutrients and foods and supplements, because we can't, with the food system today in America, our foods don't have as much nutrients in it. So I supplement, and I use Supco to check my supplements to make sure that my supplements are uh, are are quality supplements. I was taking ashwagandha, and the ashwagandha was organic. And then I checked that it was Supco, and they independently go to the store and they pull it off the shelf, or they order it from online. They don't tell them, they don't get free samples, no nothing. So I support them. It was $34.95 for the year. I support their efforts, but it is a free app, and you can check all of your supplements there. Check it out, see if your supplements are actually of good quality. And I've been changing over time. I've been changing my supplements because they haven't tested as well as what I had thought they would. So I'm so glad that Supco is here. So when those resources decline through inflammation or metabolic stress or reduced mitochondrial efficiency, the systems of the body may begin to feel the strain. Understanding NAD helps us see that health is not just about avoiding disease. It is about supporting the underlying systems that allow our cells to generate energy, repair, and resolve in itself. So once researchers began realizing that NAD levels may influence how efficiently our cells produce energy, the next logical question was not only how to restore NAD, but also why it declined so dramatically in the first place. Scientists studying aging had been measuring NAD levels for years and repeatedly found the same patterns. Tissues from older organisms consistently showed lower NAD concentrations than tissues from younger organisms. In some cases, the decline was dramatic, reaching 40 to 60% over the lifespan. That's huge. That raised a fascinating possibility. If NAD is central to energy metabolism, then losing it over time could mean that aging cells are not simply damaged, but may also be operating with fewer metabolic resources. So when scientists began looking deeper into mechanisms behind that decline, they discovered that the body is constantly using NAD in several critical repair systems. One of the most important of those systems involves enzymes known as PARP enzymes. We talked about this earlier. And these enzymes are responsible for detecting and repairing damage to DNA strands. And every day, your cells experience thousands of tiny DNA injuries from normal metabolism, oxidative stress, environmental toxins, and even sunlight. PRP enzymes locate those damaged strands and initiate repair processes that keep the genome stable. But the repair processes consumes NAD. Each time PRP enzymes fix damage, NAD molecules are used up in the process. In young tissue, this is kind of a repeat. The body replenishes that supply efficiently. And as stress accumulates and repair demand increases with age. However, NAD consumption rises. Around the same time, researchers were studying PRP activity. Another discovery changed the conversation even more dramatically. Scientists identified an enzyme called CD38 as one of the major drivers of NAD decline in aging tissues. CD38 is part of the immune system's communication network. It helps immune cells send signals during inflammatory responses. So, say that you break an ankle or you sprain an ankle, right? It gets red. It hurts, right? But it gets red, and that's the inflammation that is going in to repair the area. But CD38 also breaks down NAD. So, in a pivotal study published in the journal Cell Metabolism, demonstrated that CD38 activity increases with age, especially in tissues experiencing chronic low-grade inflammation. So when CD38 levels rise, NAD degradation accelerates. So in the study, researchers observed that mice genetically engineered to lack the CD38 enzyme maintained significantly higher NAD levels as they age compared to normal mice. Even more interesting, their mitochondria remained more metabolically active. The findings suggested that inflammation may be one of the reasons NAD declines over time. This discovery shifted the conversation through NAD in an important way. Because of focusing only on how to raise Instead of focusing only on how to raise NAD levels through supplements or precursors, researchers began thinking about the broader metabolic environment that determines how NAD is used and depleted. Chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, metabolic dysfunction, and circadian disruption can all increase the demand for DNA repair and immune signaling, which in turn increases NAD consumption. This is why it's so important. I guard my sleep as if it was gold. I try to make sure that I'm in bed by 10 o'clock. I'm lights out at 10 o'clock, that is. I will start washing up for bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock. And might do a little reading or some knitting. I got into knitting. But I try to, I put the phone down. I'm not trying to read anything online. I'm trying to make sure that I guard my sleep. So that doesn't mean that sometimes I stay up till 11 o'clock and then I have to wash it for bed at that time, but it's rare. I really guard my sleep literally as if my life depends on it, because I wake up no matter what time I go to bed. I wake up at 6:30, 5:30 in the morning. Doesn't matter. Now on the weekends, sometimes I can sleep until 7, but it's rare. So it's important for me to get to bed at the same time if I want to get the same sleep. Because if I go to bed at 4 in the morning, I wake up at 6 in the morning. If I go to bed at 8 o'clock at night, I wake up at 6 in the morning. Well, maybe 5. But it's really important that I go to bed at the same time every time because I'm a morning person. That's my circadian rhythm. My husband is a late morning circadian rhythm. So in other words, the question is not only how much NAD the body can produce, but also how quickly it is being used up. This perspective helps connect NAD research to everyday lifestyle factors. The metabolic environment of the body influences whether NAD levels remain stable or decline. When blood sugar is unstable, inflammatory signaling tends to increase. And when sleep is disrupted, circadian rhythm genes that regulate metabolism are affected. When physical activity is low and muscle mass declines, mitochondrial efficiency can fall. All of these factors shape the cellular environment in which NAD metabolism occurs. And this is one of the reasons I often emphasize metabolic health in my work with clients through Larson Nutrition. The goal is not simply to change body weight or follow a diet plan for a few weeks. The deeper goal is to help the body operate in a metabolic environment that supports long-term resilience. Building muscle through resistance training, stabilizing blood sugar through adequate protein intake, and supporting metabolic flexibility through structured fasting cycles are strategies that influence the same cellular systems researchers are studying in NAD biology. I actually have a 5-day challenge that's coming up to get more protein into your life. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are interested in doing this, I'm going to do this the second week of April. I'm going to do a 5-day challenge to get more protein in. I'm going to be sharing insights with you. I'm going to be sharing documents with you so that you can track how much protein you're getting per day, give you insights on what protein actually looks like for size wise. So check it out. I'll be sending out more information soon about this, but this is going to be a challenge to help you get to that spot. It's going to be $19.95 for this 5-day and all the documents that you're going to get with all the insights on protein. It's going to be fabulous. So keep an eye out for it. If you're interested in learning more about these approaches, check out larsonnutrition.com. It's my functional nutrition practice where I work with individuals to improve metabolic health, support hormone balance, and build sustainable habits that align with how the body actually works. Now, many people already know what they should be doing when it comes to nutrition and exercise, but implementing those habits consistently can be challenging. My programs focus on helping people bridge the gap so their daily routines support metabolism rather than constantly fighting against it. You can learn more about those programs at larsonnutrition.com. Another piece of the NAD story that researchers are beginning to explore involves environmental stressors. Many everyday products contain compounds that may contribute to oxidative stress or hormone disruption. Like I have a bunch of candles that were from, different stores, and I had to start throwing them all away because they were all with hormone disruptors. And I just burned my candles all over the place. So I'm starting to make some candles that are 18-ounce candles and some bigger, 3-wick candles so that you can actually use them in bigger rooms. So while no single exposure determines health outcomes on its own, reducing unnecessary toxic burden can support the body's natural repair system. This is one of the reasons I created Larson Botanicals. The products are designed around simple organic ingredients without synthetic fragrances or unnecessary additives. When we reduce the number of stressors the body has to process, we give those cellular repair systems a little more room to function effectively. So if you're interested in exploring those products, you can visit larsonbotanicals.com. Now, as scientists continue investigating NAD metabolism, which is becoming increasingly clear, is that NAD sits at a crossroads of several biological systems. It participates in energy production, DNA repair, immune signaling, and mitochondrial maintenance. Because of that central role, changes in NAD availability may influence how well cells adapt to stress and maintain function over time. And at the same time, the research also reminds us to approach those discoveries with nuance. The excitement around molecules like NMN or nicotinamide riboside has sometimes been translated into bold claims that aging can be reversed, but by simply increasing NAD levels. Science does not support that kind of simplistic conclusion. What the research suggests instead is that cellular metabolism is dynamic. In some cases, restoring the availability of key metabolic molecules may help cells function more efficiently. But that effect is always happening within the broader context of lifestyle, nutrition, inflammation, and metabolic health. In other words, NAD is not a magic switch that turns aging on and off. It is part of a complex network of biological processes that determine how resilient our cells are when they face stress, right? So I keep sharing what my age is, and I still look fairly young, right? Nobody ever guesses I'm 57. Nobody ever guesses it, right? I eat clean. That helps with my skin. I drink plenty of water. I'm really thirsty right now. And I take care of my health. I working out more lately because I want to make sure that I'm maintaining my muscle because I have a little osteopenia going on. So I'm doing jump training. I'm lifting weights. I'm progressively lifting more weights. I get on the bike and I race really hard doing HIIT training where I ride as hard as I can. And then I take a rest and then I ride as hard as I can. So this is really important to get your exercise in, get your weightlifting in, building that muscle while you're eating enough protein, not a lot, enough. Understanding that network helps us see why foundational lifestyle strategies remain so important. Nutrition influences metabolic signaling pathways. Exercise stimulates mitochondrial biogenesis, essentially encouraging the body to produce new mitochondria. Sleep regulates circadian rhythm, and that controls metabolic genes. Stress management reduces inflammatory signaling that can accelerate NAD depletion. All of these factors influence the same cellular energy environment. Researchers are now studying through the lens of NAD. So in the next episode, I'm going to actually be building on this foundation and explore several areas where NAD research is expanding rapidly. We'll talk about how NAD metabolism may influence brain health and cognitive aging, how it connects to metabolic flexibility and the body's ability to burn fat, and why practices like fasting and exercise appear to naturally increase NAD availability in cells. We'll also look at why these mechanisms may be particularly relevant for women navigating metabolic changes after menopause. Amen. For now, the most important takeaway from today's conversation is this. Aging is not simply a story of inevitable decline. It is also a story about how efficiently our cells generate energy, how it repairs damage and adapts to the stresses of life. NAD is one of the molecules helping researchers understand that story at a much deeper level. So thanks for joining me for this episode of the Larson Health Podcast. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, watch full episodes on YouTube. There'll be link or snippets on LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. And I'll see you in the next episode to talk more about NAD and how it impacts our health. So thanks for joining today.